Good evening and welcome to This Week in Turkey. President Erdogan and President Putin met in Sochi, in the coastal city of Sochi on October 22 as part of Erdogan's one-day visit to Russia.
The meeting centered on the security situation in northeast Syria following the launch of Turkey's Operation Peace Spring on October 9, aimed at driving the Kurdish People's Protection Units, which is seen by Turkey as a branch of the outlawed Kurdistan's Worker Party, out of the area. The presidents were accompanied by foreign ministers Mevlut Çavuşoğlu and Sergey Lavrov. The meeting, which lasted more than 6 hours, resulted in a 10-article agreement. We've signed a historic memorandum with Putin for the territorial and political integrity of Syria and the return of refugees, Erdogan said at the press conference after the meeting. Putin stated that they had reached crucial decisions that will help resolve the rather acute situation that has developed on the Syrian-Turkish border. The announcement came hours before the expiration of a 120-hour pause to Turkey's Operation Peace Spring, which was decided as a result of an agreement with the US that would allow the Syrian Democratic Forces to withdraw from the areas near the border. As a result of the agreement, Operation Peace Spring has come to an end.
As a result of the meeting between President Erdogan and President Putin on October 22, an agreement was reached regarding the fate of Northern Syria.
At the joint press conference held after a 6-hour-long meeting between the two presidents and their foreign ministers, Putin said that the Syrian Constitutional Committee would hold its first meeting on October 29. He added that the Kurds will be included in the process of the establishment of a constitution and the committee will defend the rights of the Kurds. Putin also stressed that Russia has repeatedly noted that it understands Turkey's desire to take steps to reliably guarantee its national security. We share the concern of the Turkish side in connection with the intensification of terrorism and the growth of ethnic and religious sectarianism in the area. He remarked that a durable and long-term stabilization in Syria can be achieved only if the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the country are respected. This is a principled position, and we have discussed this in detail with the President of Turkey. It is important that our partners share this approach, he added. Speaking after Putin, Erdogan announced that the two countries had reached a historic 10-article agreement that includes the removal of the YPG 30 kilometers off the border with Turkey within 150 hours. Russia's military police will ensure the removal of all YPG elements and weapons from the area, according to the agreement. All YPG terrorists and their weapons in Tal Rifat and Manbij will be taken out from this region, he said, adding that Turkey will resettle refugees in the region once a safe zone is established. At the same time, Turkish and Russian troops will begin patrols in the 10-kilometer zone in east and west of the operation zone to prevent militants' infiltration to the safe zone and to make sure of the implementation of the deal. The two countries will work together for the safe return of Syrian refugees, Erdogan further added.
This evening, Gönül Tol joins us via Skype. Gönül Tol is the director of the Middle East Institute Center for Turkish Studies in Washington, and she's an adjunct professor at George Washington University. Good evening, Mrs. Tol.
Good evening. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us this evening. So what is your evaluation of the agreement between Russia and Turkey signed earlier this week?
Well, this is certainly a huge win for Russia and the Assad regime. The regime is now in an area where it did not have control over just a few weeks ago. So without having to fight, the regime is now in northeastern Syria, and I think that will further consolidate the regime's military gains. And obviously this is a big win for Russia as well, because the Russians have they are anxious to leave Syria, they're anxious to declare victory. And now that this big chunk of territory can be brought under the Assad regime, the Russians can say that we can move forward with the political process, and that's what they will be doing. Next week, they will hold the Geneva conference. So from now on, political discussions are going to gain traction, and Russia will be leading this entire process. So I would say it was a big success for a regime and its allies.
And what about for Turkey? In Turkey, many politicians and the media have heralded this as a big victory. In what ways is it a victory for Turkey, and in what ways will Turkey now face other difficulties?
Well, I think Turkey, Erdogan got half of what he wanted from Putin. He has always wanted to push the YPG, the Syrian Kurdish militia, out of the border zone from Turkey. And according to the agreement, there will be a zone, a 30-kilometer deep zone, which is going to be off limits to the YPG. So that is a big gain for President Erdogan, and that also means that almost it's the end of the Syrian Kurds autonomy project. So that was one of the goals of President Erdogan, and he achieved that. But I think there was even a more urgent priority goal for Turkey, and that was creating a wide and deep enough zone that can host millions of Syrian refugees. President Erdogan is under domestic pressure, and I think one of the main reasons why he faced loss in recent local elections is the presence of 3.6 million Syrian refugees. So it's an urgent threat for him domestically to his rule. And creating that zone, a deep and wide zone, is quite important to his domestic calculations. But he didn't get that with the recent agreement. The Russians agreed to a limited military presence. The area that was captured by the most recent Turkish incursion, but Turks wanted a lot more, and Russia did not agree to that. So that means this agreement doesn't quite address Erdogan's more urgent need of a safe zone. It's not there. So I think in that regard, he got half of what he wanted. And also, I think what is also important to keep in mind is that Turkey wanted to create a sphere of influence and wanted to stay there and stay in Syria in the long term. I doubt that's going to happen, and I doubt that green light that came from Russia to Turkish military presence there is going to be long term. So at the end of the day, both the regime and the Russians are going to ask Turkey to leave. And we're already seeing signs that there was a reference to Adana agreement in the deal reached between Turkey and Russia. So the Adana agreement urges Turkey to work with the regime to address its security concerns. And that is a very important clause. And the fact that that clause was included in the statement, in the agreement, means that Turkey is one step closer to recognizing the regime, and that was something that the Russians have wanted all along. So to be able to work on this, the mechanism that was set up in the agreement, Turkey has to have contacts with the regime, and in fact, the Russians have already said that Turkey's Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Defense Ministries were in touch with their Syrian counterparts. So this is a significant milestone in Turkey's Syria policy. But again, I think it's important to understand, we can't tell at the moment, but I think it's important to understand what Erdogan gave in return. And there is a talk of an imminent regime offensive in Idlib. So behind the closed doors, we don't know whether Turkey agreed to a regime operation in Idlib. If history is any indication, in the past, whenever Turkey reached a deal with Russia on the Kurds, the Syrian opposition always lost. We've seen that in 2016 military incursion. We've seen that with the Afrin operation in 2018. So if there was a deal behind closed doors regarding a regime offensive in Idlib, that will, I think, complete the change in Turkey's Syrian policy. So in many ways, Turkey will have come to a full circle in its Syrian policy.
On that note, I mean, speaking about the Syrian Kurds, what is Russia's strategy vis-a-vis the Syrian Kurds and the YPG?
Well, from the very beginning of the conflict, Russians have pushed for some form of decentralization for the Syrian Kurds. And in the draft constitution prepared by Russians, they are granting rights, cultural rights, linguistic rights to the Kurds. So I think I'm not sure whether the Russians will push for a full autonomy, the kind that the Kurds have in mind. But certainly the Russians will push for some kind of a status that is different than where Kurds were before 2011. So it's almost certain that if Russia might not agree to a full-blown autonomy, they will certainly want the Syrian security forces to be integrated in the Syrian security structure. They would not allow an independent foreign policy mechanism in which the Kurds are in charge. They will not want a complete Kurdish control over its energy policy, the things that we've seen in the Kurdish region of northern Iraq, for instance. So they will not get that kind of autonomy. But on the other hand, the Kurds will not settle for what they have before the uprising in Syria started, and the Russians will certainly push for that. And that means, again, cultural rights, linguistic rights. They will probably have access to education in their own language, and a bit of autonomy in other fields like education. So I think that's what the Kurds will get in the end, and I think that's what the Russians have in mind, at least.
And what about the U.S.? What kind of role does it have at this point in northern Syria? I mean, Trump has also labeled the meeting between Putin and Erdogan to be a success, but how can we evaluate it in light of the previous meeting and agreement between Erdogan and Pence?
Well, if you... Of course, he's going to frame this agreement as a success because he's squeezed in domestic politics, and it was after his decision that we are seeing what we're seeing in northeastern Syria today, and he's come under a lot of pressure from both Republicans and Democrats on his decision to withdraw troops from northeastern Syria. So he's desperate to show what's happening in northeastern Syria to be a success. And if you look at it from the U.S. perspective, from Trump's perspective, he could make the argument that he's just delivered on one of his campaign promises, which was bringing troops home. He's not actually bringing troops home, by the way. They are relocated to Iraq, and he sent forces to Saudi Arabia. But he could claim that, he could say that, he could sell that to his base. So maybe from his domestic calculations, he can make the case that, look, I made a promise and I've delivered on that. But if you look at it from a larger U.S. Middle East policy perspective, this is certainly a huge loss for the United States because the United States is not going to be at the table. And of course, barring the fact that now there's this debate in Washington that the U.S. might send hundreds of troops back to northeastern Syria. We don't know yet. A decision has not been made on that. But if that doesn't happen, and if the U.S. military presence is not in northeastern Syria, that will mean that the United States have lost a huge leverage over the political process. So I think in that regard, many people see this as a big loss, as a decision that has undercut U.S. interests, which is curbing Iranian influence in Syria and preventing an ISIS comeback. But again, there is this debate. Just yesterday, American officials have talked to unnamed American officials have talked to media and said that the president is weighing the option of sending hundreds of troops to secure oil fields in northeastern Syria. That could change the dynamics a bit, maybe in the short term. That will certainly strengthen Kurds' hands in their talks with the regime and Russians. But in the long term, sending a couple hundred troops to secure the oil fields is not realistic, really, and it might face pushback from the Congress, who that might argue this is not legal. The U.S. troops can only be there. They were authorized to go to Syria to fight against Islamic State, not secure oil fields. So it's a complicated arrangement, and it's not, in many ways, not realistic. But if he picks that option, I think that might have an effect on the current negotiation power when they're talking to the regime and Russians.
SDF Commander Kobani has close relations both with the US and Russia. And President Erdogan has reacted quite harshly when it comes to US relations with Commander Kobani. How do you think, I mean, even just today, Foreign Minister Çavuşoğlu said that it is unacceptable for allies to meet with terrorists. So how do you think these relations will play out?
Well, Turkey is in a very tough spot. Its NATO ally is working closely with an organization that Turkey considers to be a terrorist, and it's another ally, an ally that Turkey has cultivated close relations and in many ways dependent on, doesn't even recognize the YPG as a terrorist organization. Even the PKK is a terrorist organization. So that will certainly create further problems down the road for Turkey. That will render Turkey vulnerable to the policies of the Assad regime, and vulnerable to what Russia and the US will be doing. So if Turkey fails to fix its own Kurdish problem, it's always going to be a weak actor, an actor that will that will be vulnerable. So I think that's the key point. And I want to say something on the Adana agreement too. If a mechanism is set up that addresses Turkey's Kurdish, the YPG concerns, the regime is going to be in charge. And that means that we will go back to the 1990s, where Turkey was really vulnerable to what Assad regime was doing. And the regime in Syria was using the PKK as a trump card against Turkey. And after all these years of Turkish support of the Syrian opposition, I doubt that the Assad regime is going to forget what Turkey has done in the Syrian conflict. So that gives us a strong card play against Turkey when necessary. So that's why it's imperative for Turkey to fix its own Kurdish problem. Otherwise, all outside actors, Iran, the Syrian regime, US, Russia, they will all see this and use this against Turkey.
Thank you, Mrs. Tol, for your evaluations this evening.
Thanks for having me.
And now for our next news video. After being dismissed as Metropolitan Co-Mayor of Diyarbakır, a mostly Kurdish-populated city, Selçuk Mızraklı has been arrested on October 22 on charges of membership of a terrorist organization and propagandizing for a terrorist organization.
Only the will of the people of Diyarbakır, but for the will of us all. His arrest is an unlawfulness that aims to spread fear among the whole society and to intimidate, silence, and coerce the entire opposition. Along with Mızraklı, Kayapınar District Mayor Kezban Yılmaz and Bismil District Mayor Orhan Ayaz, also from the People's Democratic Party, were also arrested on the same charges. On August 19, the Ministry of Interior dismissed Metropolitan Mayor of Diyarbakır Selçuk Mızraklı, Metropolitan Mayor of Mardin Ahmet Türk, and Metropolitan Mayor of Van Bediye Özgökçe Ertan. The mayors were removed from office on the grounds that there are 9 ongoing investigations against Diyarbakır Metropolitan Mayor Selçuk Mızraklı, 6 ongoing investigations against Mardin Metropolitan Mayor Ahmet Türk, and 7 ongoing investigations against Van Metropolitan Mayor Bediye Özgökçe Ertan at heavy penal courts.
Minister of Treasury and Finance Berat Albayrak has announced that Mehmet Hakan Atilla was elected as CEO at the Borsa Istanbul board meeting on October 22. Atilla will act as CEO and board member.
Atilla served as Deputy Director General at Turkish State-Länder Halkbank from 2011 to 2018. In 2017, he was arrested in New York for violating American sanctions on Iran. He served 32 months in prison as part of the lawsuit filed against Reza Zarrab, where he was convicted on 5 counts of bank fraud and conspiracy. Unlike Zarrab, Atilla was regarded as a hero in Turkey because he maintained he was innocent of the charges against him. He was released from prison in July, at which point he was deported to Turkey. Upon his arrival in Istanbul, he was met by Minister of Treasury and Finance Berat Albayrak at the airport. Albayrak stated on his Twitter account, after his unjust conviction, Hakan Atilla was reunited with his family and nation, and his incarceration has now ended. He begins his duty as Borsa Istanbul's general manager.
Haydarpaşa and Sirkeci, the two iconic railway stations of Istanbul, have been rented to the company Hezarfen Danışmanlık for 15 years. This tender deal was conducted outside of the knowledge of the Istanbul Metropolitan Municipality. The municipality has challenged the result of the concession tender.
The Railways Authority, TCDD, had invited bids to lease the currently unused warehouses with a total of 29,000 square meters at the train stations. 4 companies had initially placed their bids, including a consortium made up of 4 companies operated by the Istanbul municipality. At the end, only 2 companies, Hezarfen Danışmanlık and the municipality's consortium, made it to the final stage. The tender commission, however, disqualified the Istanbul municipality from the tender, citing certain irregularities in the municipality's application, and announced Hezarfen Danışmanlık as the winner. The owner of the company that won the tender is Hüseyin Avni Önder. Önder was a member of the youth branches of the Justice and Development Party and worked for the Istanbul municipality for a period of time. In a statement, Istanbul Municipal Mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu has stated, 2 of the most valuable train stations of Istanbul, Haydarpaşa and Sirkeci, were given to a company owned by a person who worked for the Metropolitan Municipality until recently, during a meeting of which we had no knowledge of and to which we do not know who participated. We were prevented from entering the tender and we were not informed about the decision. I condemn this act and will do the necessary. İmamoğlu further added, I will fight for the right of the 16 million people living in this city. You will see. We will apply to all legal routes. I'm also calling out the minister who is not doing anything about the matter. If the 16 million people in this city do not permit it, no one can enter that space. We will claim our rights. As a result of the call from İmamoğlu, a legal procedure has started. The lawyers of the municipality applied to the Regional Administrative Court for the cancellation of the tender and filed a criminal complaint about those responsible for the tender. The IMM lawyers applied to the Anatolian Courthouse in the afternoon, filed a criminal complaint to the Public Prosecutor of Istanbul about those responsible for the tender.
The Göreme Valley in the world-famous Cappadocia region has been removed from the list of national parks by President Recep Tayyip Erdogan.
According to a presidential decree that has been published in the official gazette, the valley's national park status is removed due to Article 3 of the Law on Encouragement of Tourism. The valley in the central Anatolian city of Nevşehir was declared a national park with a decree by the Cabinet of Ministers on October 30, 1986. It was included in UNESCO's World Cultural Heritage List in 1985. Lawyer Birkan Sonkata from İzmir Bar Association's Environment and Urban Law Commission has stated to Medyascope that the decision has commercial motivations. The aim is to increase tourism revenue, which means they want to increase investments in the region. Against the criticism that now Göreme will be open to investment and profit, the Ministry of Culture and Tourism has released a written statement on October 22, stating, contrary to the news reported to the public, illegal constructions that damage the area's natural character and could not be prevented previously due to bureaucratic hurdles will now be prevented.
The Kırıkkale Heavy Penal Court sentenced Fedai Varan on October 21 to life imprisonment for killing with malicious intent. Varan had stabbed his ex-wife Emine Bulut to death in front of their 10-year-old daughter in August.
The court evaluated the actions of the defendant within the scope of killing with malicious intent and sentenced him to life imprisonment in accordance with Article 81 of the Turkish Penal Code, while rejecting his lawyer's requests for a reduction. The defendant did not present any defense, invoking right to remain silent on the grounds that the court did not accept his lawyer's pleas. Varan and Bulut's family, the Ministry of Family and Social Policies that involved in the case, and the bar representatives from 81 provinces, representatives of non-governmental organizations, and women's associations attended the hearing. During the hearing, Bulut's father, Ahmet Bulut, asked to be appointed guardian to take custody of his minor granddaughter. The murder in August has raised public outcry after Bulut's final moments were captured on video. The video showed Varan stabbing his wife Emine Bulut at a cafe in front of their daughter. Bulut can be seen letting out a blood-curdling scream and saying, "I don't want to die," as her daughter begs her to live. According to We Will Stop Femicide women's rights platform, 338 women have been killed in Turkey in the first 10 months of 2019. World Health Organization data say 38% of women in Turkey are subject to violence from a partner in their lifetime, compared to about 25% in Europe.
Here are this week's match results for the Turkish teams in the UEFA Europa League.
Trabzonspor lost 2-0 to Russia's Krasnodar on Thursday in Group C. Trabzonspor is still winless at the bottom of the group with only 1 point after 3 matches. In Istanbul, Başakşehir beat Austria's Wolfsberger 1-0. It was Başakşehir's first win in the Europa League group stages this season. Beşiktaş was beaten by Portuguese club Braga 2-1 on Thursday. Beşiktaş remains winless at the end of 3 matches with 6 defeats in 11 official matches in all competitions this season.
That's all from This Week in Turkey. See you next Friday at 8 p.m. Good night.